Welcome all. Really glad you're here. Thank you for being part of our final I'm Still Standing. We're going to start in a couple minutes. Hopefully people had time to howl or different things. But we are going to start with hearing again where this all started in our song from Elton John. And then we'll begin as we're letting people in. So enjoy. Hopefully this is a good presentation and you can see. You will be on mute for the entire time. We're really trying to cut down on some Zoom bombing and making it a safe, good experience for everyone, and hope we're able to do so. So really glad you're here, and let's start.
Hi everyone. I'm working on the front line 24/7. Thank you for all your expertise, your love, your care, your humanity. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we'll start after the song.
You can never know what it's like. Your blood like when it freezes just like ice. There's the cold and lonely light that shines from you. You wind up like the wreck you hide behind that myth you use. Just to think you will never win. Look at me. I'm coming back. I got a taste of love in a second. Boy, you need to know.
Sorry folks, that won't happen again.
You know, I'm still standing there and everything, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. I'm still standing after all this time, backing up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing never could have hoped to wait. You're starting down a road and leaving me again. The threats you made were meant to cut me down. If love forget the circle, you'd be a clown by now. You know, I'm still standing, better than I ever did. Looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. I'm still standing after all that time, backing up the pieces of my life without you on my mind. I'm still standing, yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 God bless you. Thank you.
All right, folks. Hopefully that was a nice way to start tonight's talk. And again, it's been an awesome adventure with you all. And what we're here to talk about tonight is where do we go from here? And so when I've really started to think about this, I wanted to continue to talk to you about staying smart. And again, I grew up in a world where if you don't have an acronym, it's not legit. And so really the acronym we've been talking about through this whole talk is a notion of how to keep using that smart brain of yours and to parent and take care of yourself in kind of a smart way. And as you can tell, SMART is an acronym. And as we approach the next chapter, what are some of the key mindsets we want to take with us? What do we want to keep modeling, both for ourselves and for our kids? And anxiety is going to be a big thing moving forward, so let's talk about it. And then how do we recognize the warning signs? And the new thing in front of us is reintegration. I'm going to talk about some strategies and tips. And then also the T is things to keep talking about with your kids, some tips, and then some thank yous before I hand it off to my colleague. So with that in mind, what are these key mindsets that we really want people to kind of continue to have moving forward? And you can kind of see there's 4 of them. And if you've been throughout these talks, what I've been talking about is that we're in the worst marathon ever. We've been put into a position where we didn't get to practice. We have to keep running. We have no idea when the end is going to be. There's no finish line that we can see, and we're told to keep running. And that was a really hard thing and continues to be a hard thing. But there's a new challenge, and you can see from the bottom picture. Now we're going to get to run in any way we kind of want. We're going to be given more freedom with how we run. There's going to be a change. And what I think was easier for a lot of people, ourselves and kids, is when there were some hard and fast rules for how we have to be in this marathon. And those rules are going to lift. And we have to think about how are we going to do that, which we'll talk about. But my observations when I've been working with people who've set a good pace during this, during the shelter in place, people who continue to have some things going on, such as things that really take care of their mind, things that nurture their body, things that really nurture their soul, their passions, and things that help them connected to. People who have a little bit going on in these categories seem to be doing better. Kids who haven't, who've let go of some of these things, seem to be doing a little worse at this time. And so to continue, even as we keep going, being mindful of this marathon, checking in at your own pacing, and not running too fast and trying to do too much, but also being mindful of the other side, of not having enough going on, that we can just be in our head a lot and be bored. And then the other category for people who are new, the other category we've been doing as a family too, because we have to be in the same place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we've also incorporated into this kind of schedule. It's still loose, but what helps you be a good citizen to the house? That might be helping your brother, that might be cleaning, doing chores, but these are kinds of the things that we kind of keep pushing ourselves to do and kind of pushing our kids. So we want to keep that pacing going, but really we want to be mindful too of that motivational coach in our head. Who's kind of getting us to wake up every day? Who's pushing us through our goals? Who's helping us achieve right now? And I've talked about there's kind of 4 different archetypal coaches that we have in our head, personified by some of the people you're seeing. There's this very critical coach who tries to motivate you by beating yourself up. There's this more guilty coach who uses guilt to try to motivate. There's a doubting coach who's just going to doubt your ability. You can't do that. There's no way. And then there's going to be this more positive coach who believes in you, who believes in what you can achieve. And that's the coach I really want to implore you to try to bring more into your life at this time. How you start the day, how you end the day, when you're being hard on yourself, can you fire that coach that's been in your head and bring in one of these more healthy coaches? And that's when I kind of think of that. Those are kind of the bottom 2 for sure. Michelle Obama and her famous speech, "When they go low, we go high." Phil Jackson, who is one of the most winning NBA basketball coaches, who really believed in trusting his players. Coach K, who also was a basketball coach at Duke, who believes in that. And then the other side is the very critical coach in Bob Knight. The other kind of mindset I want to keep people really focused on is resiliency at this time. We need to kind of focus, and especially both for ourselves, that we can do this. We can get through this. And I love I know it's a cheesy song, but I love that song by Chumbawamba. I get knocked down, but I get up again. And that's the spirit we want to keep having. There's going to be tough times ahead. We don't know all that they're going to be, but being able to believe in ourselves to get up to keep going, and really believing that in your kids too, believing in their own resiliency, that they're going to get through this. They're going to be okay. Even the kids that are having the hardest time right now, this is challenge is going to lead to them being stronger on the other side. And really knowing and believing that in your own heart that you're going to make it through is going to be important. And then you've heard me maybe a little too much, but the last mindset really want to carry people through is dealing with stress. And one of my big metaphors I keep always talking about is think of stress like water in a dam. And you gotta have ways to get the water out of the dam. And that's not a once a week kind of thing that we take care of our water. That's a daily thing, just like eating and nourishing ourselves. We gotta get the water out and find ways to do it. And then the next thing that comes along with that what I've been working with the clients I see is, as the spirit of the water in the dam, is to really dig down in your own soul and kind of think about every couple days, what am I craving? What do I need deep down, not on a kind of food level, but on an emotional level? Am I needing to escape? Am I needing some variety? Am I feeling lonely in need of break? Am I going stir crazy? Am I bored? And when we figure out kind of deep down what we're needing and craving, that's been the most remarkable thing. And I love to see the ingenuity of the human spirit to continue to find it. And I do hope people continue to find ways to check in on that part, and then continue to find ways to get that met. So that's kind of the mindsets we want to have. But remember, part of your role for yourself and your family is you got to model this stuff. Your kids are learning so much more, not by your words, but your actions. And part of modeling that as this continues and is going to go on, some of this bad marathon, could continue to think about putting that mask on yourself before you put it on other people. Because if you're not around, if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to be there for other people? So now let's kind of jump in again to anxiety, and we've done deeper talks on this. But I want to remind you, and you can see pictures, anxiety was designed to protect us. And it knows how to do that from these things that I call biological threats. Those are cobras. Those are things we can tangibly see. Our anxiety system does a really great job of seeing danger and getting us to safety. That's what it's designed to do, and it does really well. The problem with anxiety is I talk about that we develop this thing called a smart brain. So now there's things instead of that we're evolutionary and biologically afraid of, there's things we're psychologically afraid of. Tests, disappointment, failure, being out of control. But our anxiety system can't distinguish well a biological from a psychological threat, and it tries to apply the same logic to psychological threats that it does biological threats, which is to avoid. And the problem with psychological threats is the more you avoid them, it's going to lead to your fear coming true. And that's the danger right now. One of the things as we get through COVID is we've been trying to prime our brain, our own brain, our kids' brains, that we need to listen and to follow our anxiety and get us to avoid. But our kids might not understand what is a biological threat that we have to continue to avoid, and what is something more psychological that we want to approach and conquer. And that's also one of the big challenges with COVID for our anxious brain, is it's not a threat that it can really understand. We can't see it. We can't look at it and know to avoid in that way. It's unseen. And that's what also causes us to be a really stressful, difficult period. So what's happening, we've talked about the kind of when COVID is introduced and still going on, it's kind of impacted anxious people in different ways. And I kind of highlight that these are still the two categories that I really worry about, and for yourselves and for your kids as we move through. So that first category that I worry about is the Crocodile Dundee category, where anxiety has taken COVID and now given us something really to worry about. And now we're worried about everything and kind of avoiding some of the living. And we need to because of the biological nature, but it might cross over and now there's things we're not doing too because of our anxiety. And we want to figure out how to conquer that. The bigger challenge for both adults and kids is what I'm calling the Dorothy category. There's no place like home. You're feeling good right now, you're in Kansas, but eventually all those kids are gonna have to leave Kansas and they're not gonna be equipped as well, and they've been priming their brain for the longest time to avoid, to listen to their anxiety, and it's gonna be a hard way to get out of that mindset. And so what I'm really recommending, if you fall personally in that category, you notice your anxiety is getting you to avoid more, you're not doing, what we know from the anxiety world is doing anxiety challenges, what are called exposures, are the antidote to letting our anxiety control us. And I'm still working really hard with my clients to understand the difference between a psychological threat that we want to keep challenging and a biological threat. But here are some things you can still be doing now and are probably even more important to keep doing challenges related to your anxiety at home for yourself, for your kids. And those could be food challenges. We did one week with eating gross foods. That could be still doing school challenges, writing essays, doing things that our kids don't like to do, doing things we don't like to do, practicing giving presentations, singing challenges, dance parties. If you're anxious about it and avoiding, it's really important to keep doing it to keep that anxious part of your brain in check. Perfectionism challenges. I've had clients have to put on makeup in weird ways to challenge their perfectionist, wearing their hair weird, showing up to meetings, to keep challenging that part of their brain that's being so primed to take over. So now the R part of that staying smart, and that's continuing to recognize the signs. If you haven't been running the marathon well, if you're really getting fatigued, it's time to maybe call in some help and know how to do. But here are some of the signs to know that you might need some additional help or maybe to change the way you're running. If your sleep has been impacted, if you're sleeping less, your appetite's off. A big one is the loss of pleasure. Things that used to give you pleasure don't give you pleasure, but it's not from repetitive doing, it's just no longer giving you pleasure. But a big one, if you're not performing some of your roles, have grace with yourself. You shouldn't be doing it all. We're also doing school and trying to be teachers. You can't do it all great, but if you can't get out of bed, if you can't do some of these things, it might be time to kind of reach out and ask for some help. So the next step in this whole kind of thing is we're going to do this thing called reintegration. Our social distancing is going to change, and we're going to have some new challenges that we need to prepare for. And I want people to start thinking about that now, to talk if you do have a partner, if you're doing this as a family, even if you're divorced, you're going to have these conversations, because what happens in one house is going to impact everyone. What one kid does, if your high school practices a different way, that's going to impact everyone in how they do. So here's some strategies that I'd really encourage you to game plan around. What contact with friends is going to look like? Are we going to go to work? Home strategy. If people are returning to work, what's going to happen if they test positive or they come into contact with someone later that they know has the virus? What's going to be our exposure policy if that happens at home? Are we going back to the gym? Are we not at this time? Are we going back to our prior activities that we did as a family? If something opens up, like kickball, are we going back right now or are we not? And if one parent does wind up going to work, we have to start thinking or rethinking about division of labor at home. when both parents are working at home and sharing some of those responsibilities, might be different when one parent's at work and the other parent has to then be teacher, parent, and everything, and worker, all from home. Our own comfort levels with gathering size. What are we going to be okay with? Celebrating milestones, events together. Are we going to start doing those things? Are we going to continue to social distance? In Denver, my kids have a lot of things they love to do. They love to go to the trampoline places. They love to go mini golf. They love to go bowling. They love to do lots of things. Even though these might be open, are we going to do that as a family? And then the other thing to really start thinking about, when are we going to adopt our reintegration? Are we going to be early adopters? Are we going to be more in the middle? Or are we going to be late adopters? And here are some of the new conversations you are probably going to start to have with people you encounter. What has been your social distancing policy to date? Are you hanging out with other people? What protection should we use when we hang out? To mask or not to mask? Do we keep 6 feet even though we're at the same barbecue? How are we going to do this? And the ones in purple may change because we don't know right now. We're getting mixed evidence that previous exposure to COVID, having the antibodies, might make you immune. How long, we don't know. Does it make you immune? There's so much to not know, but you might start have to have questions about their previous exposure, where they're at. And these might feel a little bit invasive, but we're gonna have to do this to feel comfortable and figure out how to stay safe, and to realize you is not just you, it's everyone in your household. As I said, if your high schooler hangs out with a big party, and you've been saying everyone needs to have smaller gatherings, that impacts everyone in this reintegration piece. So it's going to be really important that we have these conversations with everyone. So because there's so much to talk about, so much to prepare for, I want to give you some tips that I've been thinking about of how to do this. So before you venture in to start having these conversations with your partner, and especially what I've seen in the couples I'm working with, that one partner is probably raring to go, doesn't really see this as a big threat, and another partner is freaking out right now. That before you kind of have the conversation, agree to the rules of the game. How well are you going to play any game, and you can see backgammon, if we're playing with different rules? It's not going to go well. So before you even jump in, talk about what are the rules we're going to use. Are we going to use a compromise strategy? Are we going to shoot for win-wins? Are we going to go for the more anxious person wins these ones because it's life and death? Whatever you agree to, how are we going to do it? But decide the rules of the game before you approach these conversations. And that's what kind of leads to a lot of problems with couples, is they try to keep having these arguments or conversations without first agreeing to the rules. One thing I'm recommending and that we're going to kind of do is this notion of creating pacts. And that's an agreement with smaller groups of people who all agree that we're going to kind of only keep to each other. We're going to all practice the same sort of social distancing. We're going to be really safe. And those are the people that we're going to see during this time. And if you're not part of the pact, that might suck, but that leads to the third thing of what's going to be really important during this time in reintegration is getting comfortable with disappointment. Disappointing others, disappointing your kids who might see some variation, and being able to be more comfortable with disappointment. That's a really hard thing for people. And whenever you're trying to not disappoint one person, know there's always someone who will be disappointed because you're not willing to disappoint them. So if I say yes to a party that my spouse isn't comfortable with, I haven't disappointed the party people, but I sure have disappointed my spouse. So being ready to be more comfortable with disappointment at this time. And it's going to be really important that you get buy-in from the family, and having a way to talk about whatever you agree with as a partnership, how to talk about it with your kids and get them to buy in, And the older you are, the more they might just need to be part of that initial conversation and agreement so we can all do that. So last couple of things besides the tips is what to talk with your kids about. And I've been talking about that. That's a really important piece to keep doing throughout this process. And it can vary week to week, but thinking ahead, here are the things I really would like you to continue to talk with your kids about. So based on this new thing, you need to talk with your kids about how they talk with their friends and ask them hard questions to know whether they can hang out with them or not. If their parents have been not practicing social distancing and your family has said only people who are still kind of quarantining we can hang out with, helping your kids ask that and then helping them be able to say, well, I can't hang out with you, I'm bummed about it, but being able to do that. We want to continue to talk about the coronavirus, which is represented as Voldemort. And I always talk about that like Harry Potter, that everyone was afraid to talk about Voldemort. They wanted to call him he who must not be named. But Harry and Dumbledore knew that by doing that, that gave him more power. And we believe and know the same thing with anxiety, with COVID. We got to talk about it. We want to find the right language for our kids that they understand, but we got to keep talking about it, seeing how they're viewing it, whether it's changing, and helping to be there to help them work through it. And then the other thing I've been really focusing on too is parents have been really great in gung-ho continuing to focus on the lemonade, but being able to continue to create space for your kids to talk about the lemons. There are still a bunch of lemons coming up for our high schoolers' graduation. Many of them have already missed prom. There's college parties, college trips. There's college kids who are home too, who've missed out on now first semester, second, whatever year. People called back from their study abroad. Things, activities, celebrations, milestones. There's lots of things that people have a right to be grieving about. And to make it safe and comfortable to grieve and give that space to talk about the lemons, and then to also figure out a way to make lemonade, but create space for both. And what I'm really recommending, whatever milestone you might be missing or coming up on, to find a way to celebrate, even on a smaller scale, the day of, but to start making a commitment and a planning of a much bigger way to celebrate that milestone when this is all done. And you're starting to see that even now too. I don't know if you've seen LeBron James is creating a nationwide graduation for seniors of high school. It's going to have some of the biggest names kind of celebrating. So finding a way to market, but then creating something smaller. I've seen parents do things with prom, creating to celebrate the day of prom, but continuing to think about these bigger events. How do we do something bigger later and really celebrate the heck out of it? And then the last thing to keep talking about is that this really is the worst marathon, folks. No one would sign up for it. No one would want it. And so continuing to look for yourself at your pacing. Are there times you can pick it up and do a little more to help you feel more energized? And are there times you just have to slow it down a little bit that week, that day, to help recharge? Because this is going to keep going on for a while. And that's one of the biggest challenges. And one of the last things we've been doing to talk about is talking to your kids who are a big part of this, of what's going well, what's not going well, and what we know, and you can do this with your relationship too, I probably should add that, is checking in with your spouse. How are we doing during this week? How's COVID going for us? And to try to hear from the people you care about most what's working, what's not working. And that doesn't mean you have to change it, but if you can, maybe you do, or you can still talk to your kids about some of the things. So we've been doing this every week. And this week, again, the kids have been really appreciative. We've been able to be more around. That's what they've requested. So doing more help with their assignments, giving them a little more time to themselves. And again, my little guy, he's having the hardest time, giving more attention. My bigger kids have school right now. They're busy in their activities. So my little dude, who's so used to having everyone to be around and doing things together, now has to entertain himself a little more. So I would continue to recommend with the key people in your life that you're spending a lot of time with, slow down and check in. So the last thing, we've been doing this for 6 weeks, folks, and it's been a blast and really great to have so many of you here. But this couldn't have been done without a big effort on a lot of people's parts. And just want to take a minute to acknowledge many of them. First off, where I work, the Helen and Arthur Johnson Depression Center, for helping us put on, for getting this on our website, for being part of this. Many people have volunteered their time to do breakouts over the 6 weeks. And so Melissa Batt, Dana Stedman, Matt Mishkin have been big parts, and they're on, a couple of them are on tonight. Amy Lopez has been my amazing sidekick through the whole thing. You're gonna hear her talk next. Tiffany, and then we've had some amazing guest speakers from the community, Mindy Solomon, Audrey Blakely Smith, Jessica Hawks. And these are all, if you can get to hear them, they all are experts in the field, and we were able to tape their presentations. So if you didn't get to, feel free to go to the website, hear what we talked about before, here's these things in greater depth. And then the last thing I really want to thank is my family. Again, every time I do something like this, that means my wife is stepping up. That means my kids are without me, and they've been a big part. So I want to thank them. And then to Jeffco and Douglas County for, again, getting this out to you all, being great partners, and we have been really able to do a lot. So the last thing, to know kind of things have occurred, I want to take a minute before I do hand it off to slow down and think about on this journey so far. I call it kind of the stoplight. Based on what you heard today, based on anything, what might you stop doing? Maybe I'll stop criticizing myself. Maybe I'll focus a little more on my resiliency. Something you might stop doing. Something you might start doing based on this, and something you might keep doing. So again, we have this chat function that's only coming to us to keep safety. Feel free to write those things so we hear that we've made a difference, anything you want to write. And I am going to take a minute and just play a really song that kind of speaks to me during this time while you do it, and then we'll hand it over to my partner in crime, the wonderful Dr. Amy Lopez. But take a minute, slow down, reflect, maybe set some goals for yourself as we transition to this new marathon part that's going to be really hard and difficult. What you want to take.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. Don't make the best of this task and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and their skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life.
I'm going to pass it over to my colleague.
Hello and welcome to all of you guys. Let me go ahead and get my, let me get this slideshow started here. And welcome to all of you guys. I first want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to Dr. Scott Cypers for inviting me to be part of this really wild ride of figuring out how we can really provide community level support. And it's been amazing and it's been really fun and I'm grateful to have been part of it. So I first wanted to also thank the clinical and administrative staff and team and board over at the Johnson Depression Center, that we also couldn't have done any of this without their ongoing support, and really just appreciate how they've stood behind us as we tried to present this to you guys and support you through the community. Just really quick, I wanted to point out my background this evening. I know it's a little bit darker than maybe you're used to, but it has a lot of meaning for me tonight. And so this is from the movie Tangled, which some of you may have seen or some of you may have not. It actually has, it's actually very appropriate for quarantine. So if you've got nothing else to do, I would take a look at it because it does provide some tips for getting through being stuck at home. But it also, the reason I have this one up is there's a scene where she goes to see the lanterns or wants to go see the lanterns. And the reason I like the lanterns is because they signify hope. They signify hope that the lanterns are raised each year in hope that things are going to be okay. And so when I found this background, I thought, that's the story I want to tell, is there's still hope. I want to present the hope. I want to say we put up the lanterns with the hope that things will get better. So again, welcome to all of you guys. And the first thing we're going to do is just take a deep breath. Whew, and say, here we are in week 6. In week 6, we made it through another week. And just kind of a quick check-in of how are you doing? How are you handling this? Does it feel any different in week 6 than it did in week 1? And that's a valid question. And so that's something maybe even if you get the chance to reflect with your kids to ask them that is, how does it feel different than when we first started this? So each week I kind of keep track of the trends that I'm seeing. And kind of my rule is that if I have to say something more than once in the course of my patient sessions, it becomes a trend. So one of the ones, again, is this notion that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And thank goodness we are going to get through this and we're going to be at the other side. But wait, that's just as scary as where we are now. And as Scott mentioned, that we are probably going to have a hard time getting out of quarantine than we did going into it. That, as he said, there were a lot of really clear-cut rules. Now the rules are a little bit more flexible. It was also, we are moving from chronic, we're moving from acute and immediate and emergency to kind of chronic and long-term. And that's a very different set of stressors and a very different way to look at the world, which really comes into this question is, what is normal even going to look like? And we're going to talk about that because we don't know. And then the other thing I added just today, because I probably said this at least 3 times today, is that we actually can't control what other people do. So if we go back out to the store and people aren't wearing masks, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. If we keep our kids inside and the neighbors decide to let everybody else have a community kickball game, we don't have control over that. And that's one of the things I think people are finding really frustrating, is that we don't have a set upon agreed rules the way we did when quarantine first started. People are in quarantine fatigue. You know, my trend for several weeks was, this isn't really fun anymore, and I don't know how much more I can do, but on the other side, am I really ready to go out? Am I really ready for this? Am I really ready to go to the grocery store? Am I really ready to see people again? Am I, maybe we're not going to have the big celebrations, but am I even ready to meet up with my friends for a happy hour? And I think the problem is we don't know. We are tired of being home. We're tired of being stuck inside. But is it better than the alternative? I go back to, again, in the movie Tangled, and not to spoiler alert for any of you guys who want to turn me off for a second, that there's a scene where this is exactly what Rapunzel is thinking when she leaves and then is like, should I have left? Should I not have left? Should I have left? Is it scarier out there, or is it scarier stuck where I am? And again, I think we don't know, but I think that's a really valid conversation to be having with your family. Because this next one is what comes next. Now, we have some big changes coming that may really impact your family. One is that although the kids won't be going back to school, parents may be going back to work. And that may be one parent, that may be both parents, or they may be going part-time to work. And what is that going to look like? We don't know if summer camps are open or not. We don't know if parents are going to be able to return full-time. What do we do if grandma and grandpa still can't watch the kids and help us out? And so I think there are lots of questions as things start to change. But I think there are also things that are going to stay the same, that a lot of our interactions and social distancing that we're doing now, we probably need to continue throughout the summer. It's mostly going to be stay-at-home time, in part because what's even going to be open? And as Scott was mentioning, if it is open, do you want to go? And again, for right now, the kids' routines probably aren't going to change, at least until we get through the end of the school semester. So there's a lot of talking, and again, to be able to talk with your family to say, how are we going to navigate these new changes of what our new normal may be? So in the beginning of this, we took our guidance from Olaf, who said, let's control what we can and let go of what we can't. Right now, we're going to take our guidance from Elsa and really just jump into that unknown and say, we don't know. And that's a valid response to your kids right now when they ask if we're going to go to summer camp. I don't know. Will my birthday in July be canceled? I don't know. Our swimming pool is going to be opened. I don't know. And when we do know, we will make those decisions then. So when and if the swimming pool opens, we will talk about it as a family and decide whether or not it makes sense for our family and if this is what we really want to do. One of the pieces as we go into the unknown is this summer is that it may be harder to stay at home. You know, that there were times over this quarantine where we had really nasty weather, and in a way it was kind of easy to stay home. It's like I didn't really want to go anywhere anyway. But I don't know, it's going to be harder when normally when the kids aren't in school and they don't have homework assignments due and the weather's nice and normally you would be out and doing things. It's going to be harder probably when we also add in that quarantine fatigue. One of the things we're probably going to see a resurgence of is all the grief and loss of the milestones. Now, granted, they may not be big ones like graduation, but maybe that 4th of July parade is actually really fun for your family. And so expect that throughout the summer, especially with the kids, we're going to see the same issues of grief and loss that we saw kind of throughout the earlier weeks in some of this quarantine. On the other hand, as I said, it's also safe at home. So if it's safe at home, what do we do? How are we going to move out of this? And again, we don't even know how afraid to be. We don't know whether or not things are contained. We don't know if we're going to have a resurgence. And so it does feel scary, and home feels safe. You know, as Scott talked about, it's those there's no place like home people. We're going to have a really hard time moving back out into the normal world, whatever that's going to be. So let's talk about some tips and some strategies. One is to really try and make changes slowly. That, you know, if you can go back to work maybe two or 3 days a week, or maybe half days, to really kind of figure out a plan of how that's going and how that's working. Or, you know, to say, we are going to do maybe a small vacation. We're going to go away for the weekend. We're not going to take that 3-week road trip across the country that maybe we had planned. Also, one thing at a time is to say, again, that as things open up and parents may be returning to work, that may be the focus. Is to say, we're not going to worry about summer camps or sports or anything right now, but really thinking about how do we make the changes we most need to make. Thinking now, one of the things I've been really talking with parents about is thinking about during this time, what worked, what did work really well, and whether that was charts, whether that was you know, taking turns with chores, whether it was making one night a week family dinner night and one night a week stay at home dinner on your own night. Thinking about what from this time did you have to adapt to that works and what has helped people stay safe and feel safe. And then also recognizing when things aren't going as great as you want. Talking about it as a family and being able to talk about precautions and safety. I want to come back and talk about the last one, recognizing when there isn't a choice. And basically coming back and saying, there may be some things we don't have a choice about, that you may have to go back to work. It's not even a decision that you can say, do we do this or do we not? It's what you have to do. As Scott mentioned, is really having the conversations about what are we going to do and how are we going to keep ourselves safe? And then to recognize that may not happen at the same pace for everyone. That, you may have one kid who's chomping at the bit and can't wait to get out the door, and you may have another kid who's hiding under the table and not ready to do anything. And that may be different between you and your spouse. As I said too, is being able to have the conversation that also is going to vary from family to family. So just because the neighbors next door have started inviting everybody over, your family may not do that. And how are you going to talk about it? And how are we going to decide as a family, and how are we going to navigate this? So it's coming back as all along I've been talking about this notion of having a personal plan and having a family plan. What would you most like to do and what would you most like to see? But how do we start to navigate that as a family as well? And thinking about how do we prioritize? How do we help each other? What do we do if all of a sudden kids are at home when parents are having to go to work, and how are we going to figure that out? So I think there's a lot that needs to be discussed, and as Scott recommended, that really just having those conversations is the next best step. This is the last time we're going to be able to meet with all of you, that we are kind of at the end of our stay-at-home community support process, but some of you may feel like you're not ready to be done. And that's what I wanted to just offer to you, is if you're not quite ready, we have some suggestions. And so one of those is that we're not the only game in town, that there are actually a number of different parenting programs and parenting support groups out there. You can find them through Facebook, you can find them through community referrals. There are a number of different ways in which you can get the same kind of experience you've had here. If you're not sure, check with your school. They actually are a great resource for other things in the community that might be helpful. Mental Health Colorado has a really great referral program, and so does Colorado Crisis Services. And so if you need immediate support, Colorado Crisis Services is great, but they can also help you figure out what other options are available. Maybe you don't need a full-time therapist, but you just need somebody to chat with. And so either of those agencies are happy to help with that. Always check with your health insurance. That's a great way to start if you feel like you need more support or medication, or you're just not coping well and want some additional time to work through that. That's a great place to start, is to check with your health insurance. EAPs, your Employee Assistance Program, is also good for that as well. And then general help sites like United Way 211. Maybe you, again, don't need a full psychiatric evaluation, but you would like to be able to just find some other people or some other groups or other people to talk to. So here are just some ongoing and general resources. If you visit our website at coloradodepressioncenter.org, we actually have a page that says resources that will go into more depth about where you can find more help for your mental health care if you need it. Just like Scott said, I want to say thank you. I want to thank all of you for joining us in this wild ride. And I want to go ahead and just, again, encourage you and say, you guys got this. You guys can do this. So where we wanted to kind of leave you with and talk about right now is, if you've gotten what you needed from us, great. That's fantastic. And we wish you the best of luck on this journey. If you're not quite done, one of the things we would ask is that you join us. We're going to do some support groups. We're going to break into smaller support groups and be able to help you figure out what comes next and what comes for you and your family. So the process right now is, if you're done, best of luck to you. We hope that this transition goes well, and feel free to reach out to us at the Depression Center if you need more information or have questions. If you want to stick around, feel free to hang out and we'll assign you to a breakout room where we can keep the conversation going.
And one more thing, folks, again, thank you. And if you do, I'm very happy to be a personal resource. The name of our program is called the Family Program. And if you've been with us through the last 6 weeks, we want to help your family and we try to treat people like family. So if you do feel like you're stuck, my email has been blasted everywhere. Feel free to email me. No, I do have ADD. And what that means in my world, if I respond within 24 hours, I will have responded, but if I don't, it's gone into a black hole in my mind. So I just ask that you email me one more time, and I appreciate it. I never find that as a nudge or anything. So just know that, and if we can do anything for you, feel free to email, and we'll try to help point you in the right direction or see what we can do. And it's been a wonderful ride. And again, if you stick around, we're going to break out into breakout rooms in about 2 minutes. And if you got what you needed, wonderful. And we will, again, best of luck during these tough times.